Namaskar, Nilesh. This would be the session number 49 in Shraddha and Pradnya series. I have not specifically called it Shraddha and Pradnya, but that's what I will place it in the sequence, in the playlist. So that's Shraddha and Pradnya number 49. All right, this one is a response to a question from someone who is very enthusiastic about Mahabharata evidence, Mahabharata astronomy evidence, and specifically evidence of 5 visible planets. Someone who is appears to be taking deep interest in the dating of Mahabharata. And the 32 descriptions is what I have counted, what I'm going to share with you. And so just I wrote it down when I created this PowerPoint presentation, 32 descriptions of 32 descriptions for the 5 visible planets: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Mercury. I will also explain the counting scheme so that there is no confusion as to where are these 32 descriptions. So there will be, in some sense, double counting, but it's not actually a double counting. And I'll explain why that is so, because of the constraint that is brought in by each of this planet when anytime it is mentioned. So that if there are, let's say there is a description of conjunction, then there are, then that particular, let's say there's a conjunction of 2 planets, then that particular reference will be counted twice. Okay. And let's see, I may explain more or I may not explain it. Okay, quickly, I forgot to pick up the initials of this person who asked the question. So that's okay. Somebody wrote, and this is, he has written a lot of other things. I just tried to take a slice of what he wrote so that the subject remains compact, okay, and specific. So he says, you state, that is, I state that Mahabharata has more than 50 planetary evidence. Yes, I do assert that this is not my guess or anything. Mahabharata text is out there. Anyone can test it very easily that, yes, Mahabharata text has more than 50, that is 50 plus specific description instances of planetary evidence. On the other hand, this individual says, I am reading books by other Mahabharata researchers. He does not specify which books, specific books, which researchers, which claims he's reading. And he says, and they do not describe more than 5 instances of planetary evidence. Now, this does not surprise me at all. In fact, 5 is like a huge number, and we will briefly discuss that. Then he goes on. I would like to test that he would like to test planetary evidence using astronomy software for visible planets. And I took that to mean Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Mercury. Now, in Indian astronomy, also Western astronomy, from a visible astronomy perspective, Sun and Moon are also taken as Graha, or in the Western astronomy, planets. I am not including them for 2 reasons. One thing, I don't know if this person, by visible planets, he also meant Sun and Moon. But even if he would have even if he would have meant Sun and Moon, like he wanted to include Sun and Moon, this session would have become huge. Okay, that's how super rich the descriptions of Sun and Moon are. And they are worth treating them separately. In fact, I have started a series in this very series of Shraddha and Pradnya, and you will see the episode at some point where you will see how rich is the evidence for Sun and Moon. And frankly, I have to admit that I may not have identified every single instance when Sun and Moon are mentioned, because they come so often in all different descriptions. Anyways, so for this particular episode, we will stick it to 5 visible planets from Saturn to Mercury. He says, I have your books. So that is to say, he has my books, but it is hard to identify the evidence for each planet. That is correct. Specifically, the first book, when did the Mahabharata war happen? And yes, most of the evidence, but not all, shows up if you look at the back of the book. Uh, the first page and a half, first 2 pages or so is all planetary evidence. But that's not to discount additional planetary evidence that is spread over the next 200 to 300 observations. All right. Okay, so that's fine. Would you be so kind, he's asking me, to provide the planetary evidence and explain to me in what sequence I must test them in this software? He does not mention if he has seen my videos. Well, I would encourage him to see all my videos in this particular series, Shraddha and Pradnya, where I have gone over all the evidence for Saturn, for Jupiter, for Mars, for Mercury and Venus, and I have completed that. Okay, about like just recently I completed that. In any case, he has a second question. So the first is not that important, but I'll take the opportunity to tell you, uh, combine that with his second part of the question, where he says, and explain to him in what sequence he must test them in the software, or he should, ought to, can, preferred. Is there a preferred way of testing? And well, I'll just share my thoughts. My quick response at a high level before I go into a specific uh, evidence is this, that he should first become familiar with the astronomy software that he wants to use. He can use any software of his choice, and he has to basically take the ownership uh, for selecting a specific software. My choice would be Voyager 4.5, but if he doesn't want to use it, hey, be my guest. The second point I would mention, and I would insist, and this is not only for him, but anyone, any Mahabharata researcher, any Mahabharata enthusiast, any new individuals interested in understanding the history of the world through Mahabharata, the sheet anchor for Indian history, the Mahabharata, and the dating of Mahabharata and understanding its as Itihasa. I would suggest, I would insist, not suggest, because people say, oh, you suggested it. No, I insist. And they may still ignore the advice, but they shouldn't waste time here anyways. At least select one additional claim, of course, besides 5561 BC. 5561 BC is given if they want to test this, and the reason basically they have asked me this question. One additional claim, at least one additional claim for the year of Mahabharata war. Whatever they think is the best from the rest of the 130 plus other claimed years. Now, it would be also very good if they can explain what led them to select a specific claim as the second best. And it will be a distant best, but let me not go into that argumentation, be away from 5561 BC. But the point is, it's not very easy to do. So it will be very, I would be very curious to know why the individual, this particular individual, but anyone who wants to do something similar, why they selected a specific claim. Keep that in mind. I'm asserting that there are 50 plus descriptions of the planet. Now, I just wrote down 32. Okay, I'll explain that in a minute. That 32 is only for these 5 planets, which is Shani, Brahaspati, Angarak, Shukra, and Buddha. Okay, the additional ones, actually many more than 50, they come from the phases and positions of the moon, related to eclipse, which is also, if you look at it, is a planetary evidence, like because the position of the planet, such as sun and moon, is fixed. And there could be many other descriptions of sun and moon. So many more than 50 in reality, but as far as the 5 visible graha, and excluding sun and moon, 32 descriptions, that's what I am saying here. In any case, whoever wants to test this must select at least one claim besides 5561 BC. And if they are courageous enough, intelligent enough, they can select many more. But If you have not done this before, do not select more than one, but select one additional claim besides 5561 BC, and try to select one that you think, even in your subjective judgment, you think is the best or the second best. And if you think is better than 5561 BC, hey, be my guest. But there is none out there. In any case, the third point, this is very important. The bullet number 2, what I said, the selection of one additional claim besides 5561 BCE. This is the method of science, guys. Okay, it's always in a comparison to what's out there. Then only you start appreciating. This is very important to appreciate the beauty and validation of 5561 BCE. Okay. Now, the last point that he asked, is there a preferred method to test this? And my point is, well, there are more than one way to skin a cat. So that's true. There are more than one way to test, validate the Mahabharata planetary evidence. And I would suggest, I will share a couple different ways to do it. But whoever wants to do it must do this multiple times. Okay, it's not something just you plug the numbers and hit enter and it's done. Many people who write to me, actually, I notice, and this is not a new phenomenon. I have noticed this going back 10 plus years. And I have done like a Skype calls. The Zoom possibly did not exist, or at least I did not know about it. So I remember doing calls through Skype, and I wouldn't say many, few individuals, very good in IT, but had an extremely naive idea as to how Mahabharata descriptions can be just put it into some algorithm or put it into like an input data card, like, and just simply run the planetary algorithm. No, it's not that simple. Anyways, there are many ways to do it, but you should also do it multiple times. That's my point. And always with another claim, which I already repeated, to truly appreciate what 5561 brings and how it beautifully corroborates Mahabharata evidence, all kinds of evidence, but here specifically planetary evidence. Let's begin with the planet Saturn, the slowest moving visible planet to naked eye in our solar system. I have discussed this evidence many times, but this is like to show what is the Saturn evidence that I have found. To the best of my knowledge, this is all that is there in the Mahabharata text for Saturn, Shani, Shanishcha. But if you find additional evidence, I'm not saying that it's not there. It's very easy to miss the evidence in 125,000 plus verses. Please bring it to my attention. Very interesting that this individual says, not surprisingly, that all other Mahabharata researchers or whoever he has read, and he's reading some books or whatnot, do not refer to more than 5 instances of 5 descriptions of planets. Surprising to many. It should be surprising to you, and that should tell you the quality of that research. Right here, just only for Saturn, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 descriptions. And guess what? In those 6 descriptions, in reality, we have one more, the Brihaspati description. So that's like 7. But I'll skip that and bring it back to 6 for a simple reason that this reference from Bhishma Parva, critical edition 3.19, there the reference is given as a Shvetograha and distinctly it's not mentioned as a Saturn. So now I am asserting that this is a description of Saturn, but because the person who asked this question wants to objectively test this, he will not able to test Shvetograha until and unless he is convinced with my assertion that that particular description refers to Saturn. So even if you remove that for a second, you are left with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so it's like somebody saying, oh, okay, so all the other Mahabharata researchers, only thing they're discussing is Saturn descriptions and then nothing else. Well, more or less it's like that, but even that is not true. Do you know what happens? No single other than Nilesh here, okay, or other than 5561 BC, no other Mahabharata researcher dares discuss this evidence here. Samvatsara sthainancho gruha prajvalito uva vishakayo samipusto Brihaspati Shanishcharo. Also, the aspect graha tamra arunashiko prajvalanta vivastito saptarshina mudaranam samavachyadya vaipruvam. Now, what you will find is, of course, someone extremely naive individual will say, well, hold on, I remember listening to so and so or reading that book, and he or she does discuss this evidence. Yeah, of course, there are few who try that. The question to ask is, do they show Brahaspati and Shanishcharo in the vicinity of a Vishaka or right at Vishaka? Okay. Um, just take those last two lines. The answer is no. Nobody, absolutely, the score other than 5561 BC is zero. This is precisely the reason I insist that whoever wants to do it, and definitely this individual, must take at least one other alternate claim for the year of Mahabharata war. Then the person will realize, no, this particular verse cannot be shown to be valid by anyone else for their year. Well, let's go backward. What about this one? Bhagam nakshatra akramya surya putrena pidite. Saturn near, akramya is near nakshatra bhaga. Not even a single other Mahabharata researcher other than 5561 BC will able to show Saturn near bhaga nakshatra. Okay. Now, this one, Shveto, we just decided to skip it right now, but that is near Chitra. Okay, if somebody accepts it, so if this individual wants to test my assertion, then the person should test this verse and see how Saturn can be also described as Samati Kramya Tishtati in the vicinity of a Chitra and settled there. But Saturn, wherever it is going to be settled. So one can check that. But even if you skip this, now we are left with these two middle verses first. They both are saying the same thing. Okay, so Saturn is afflicting nakshatra of Prajapati, which is Rohini. So that's why they are saying the exactly same thing. And now the question is, who is that researcher who shows Saturn afflicting nakshatra Rohini? And what is that specific definition? There can be multiple definitions in principle. That's true for here, each of these observation. But once you make a definition, you have to hold it consistent. So for example, there are few Mahabharata researchers who have claimed that Saturn being near Nakshatra Rohini, Nakshatra of Prajapati, is like it is giving Pida. And I think it's a reasonable description. What is the problem with that particular interpretation? The problem is that while someone showing a Saturn near Nakshatra Rohini for their claim year of Mahabharata war, if they can actually show Saturn near a particular nakshatra, which will happen every 30 years for any nakshatra, yeah, that's acceptable. The problem is, as soon as they nail this down in this fashion, they will not able to show Saturn near nakshatra Bhaga. They will not able to show nakshatra, planet Saturn near in this vicinity of nakshatra Vishaka in the company of Brahaspati. Okay, so if they accept this with that specific definition, which few Mahabharata researchers have done, then they have to accept that their particular year will not able to match this particular reference of Shani, Saturn, and same thing for here. One more thing that any other researcher claiming this, and that's true for 5561 BC also, should able to show is that why Vasudev explains moon and Saturn, only moon and Saturn rather, okay, as a comparison with Shalya and Yudhishthir fighting on the 18th day of the war. I have done other sessions and I would encourage you to watch them, of course, in this series, Shraddha and Pradnya. Only 5561 BC can explain why there is a mention of moon with Saturn as this celestial scenario and its terrestrial comparison with Shalya and Yudhishthir fighting. Only you can show this for 5561 BCE, and the 18th day of the war is 2nd November 5561 BC. All right. So this is just a scenario for Saturn. Now keep this in mind that this individual said that other books that he has read, other researchers, other claims, they do not discuss more than 5. In fact, 5 is like they're trying their best and it still fails miserably. But let's give them a benefit of doubt. The question is, why only 5? What happens to other 50 descriptions? Why are they not discussing it? And if they're not discussing it, what is the statement of their theory? Okay. And why did they think it's okay to not look at this evidence? Okay. It does not qualify anything. It does not qualify on the basis of science, logic, common sense, any of it. Okay. Let's go to the next planet, Jupiter. Now, in case of Jupiter, so if you look at this, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So now you can think of this as six pieces of evidence, six pieces of planetary descriptions, namely Saturn. Or even if you don't want to input Saturn, you can just say, hey, there is this one planet, Shweta. Okay, so that's still counted. And keep in mind, there is a Brihaspati here. Now, I'm counting this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Keep in mind, now this gets a bit tricky. I'm going to still count it as a 6. But the tricky part is this evidence, the Udyoga Parva evidence and Bhishma Parva evidence are essentially saying the same thing. Okay, so Saturn afflicting Rohini. So do you count this as two separate instances or do you count this as one? I would say, well, I mean, it's not a big deal, but if you want to count one, then be consistent. If you want to count these as two, be consistent as well. I'm going to count this as a two. And what I'm going to say is that this has a additional value. For example, in case of Saturn, it doesn't matter whether you take a certain reading, certain description of Saturn, say today and 1 month from today and 2 months from today and 3 months from today. You are not going to see a much change in the position of Saturn during that 2, 3, 4, 5 months or something like this. Saturn essentially stays in one nakshatra for a whole year, actually year plus. Okay, it may go back and forth. You know, it's going to have a retrograde, but a one nakshatra space plus minus one nakshatra, that's it. Okay, that's why I said. Now, this tells you why some observation of Saturn as seen as afflicting nakshatra Rohini made in Udyoga Parva, and again, such a similar observation made in a Bhishma Parva with possible gap, and I know exactly how much that gap is gap of about 1 month and 7 days, but a gap of few days doesn't make any difference. So therefore, it is a very robust way of understanding the robustness of the astronomy observations or planetary observations made in Mahabharata text. Okay, let's move on. That's right. Now, the last one, we are counting this for Saturn, but now I'm taking you to Jupiter, and I'm also going to count this for Brihaspati. And somebody will say, now, is that a double counting? Now, this is a different type of issue because there, Saturn afflicting Nakshatra Rohini, we had two references, one from Udyoga, one from Bhishma. And the question was, do we count them as one or two? Here, the issue is we are looking at the exactly same shloka, exactly same description. But because there is a description of two different planets, Brihaspati and Shaneshwara, that is Jupiter and Saturn, being in the vicinity of a Vishaka, staying there, shining brightly for up to 1 year. And then there are more additional descriptions. These two planets are described as with their extended shikha, okay, coppery shikha, tamra, bright coppery shikha, okay. And also they are bright, they have become settled. So naturally that's a retrograde. Because remember, if one particular verse has descriptions of two planets, it brings additional constraints from the optimization perspective in solving the jigsaw puzzle, solving the crossword puzzle, and therefore I count this as twice. So I'm just explaining my principle behind it. Okay. So there is, we counted once there, but we are going to count it here again. Now I don't need to describe this. I already did it. So that's like 6 there. This is 7. And then we have 8, 9, and 10. So 6 plus 4, that's a 10 different instances. Now, something to keep in mind. Just like we had a Shweto Graha there, that I insist or I assert that it is referring to Saturn right here. In case of Jupiter evidence, I'm asserting that the Shamo Graha that is described here in Bhishma Parva Critical Edition 315 is referring to Jupiter. Now, this is based on my research work, but some new person looking at a Shamo Graha would not know what that Shamo Graha is. And prima facie, that individual does not have to accept my assertion that Shamo Graha is Jupiter. Eventually, if the person goes through a scientific, logical way of looking at this evidence, he or she would agree with my assertion that Shamo Graha has to be Jupiter. But prima facie, they don't have to accept that. So we still take that as evidence. Some Graha Shamogra, Prajwalita, Sadhoma Sapavaka, Indra Tejasvi Nakshatram, Jeshta Akrami Tishtati. So whether somebody agrees with Shamogra as a Jupiter or not, with my assertion, another researcher, let's say, that person has to say what is Shamogra and then show how that is near Nakshatra Jeshta, and it was near Akramya, and also Tishtati. It was there for a long time. Now, the Tishtati occurs many times. In fact, notice this. It occurs for a Shvetograha near Chitra also. So the way that Shvetograha, I'm saying Saturn, Shamogra, I'm saying it's Jupiter, but if somebody else wants to say Shveto equal to some other planet, Shamo equal to another planet, they have to show how those planets, whatever they are claiming, how that Shveto was near Chitra, Tishtati, and that Tishtati can be explained, and the Shamo, whatever that planet was, also Tishtati, and near Jeshta. That needs to be explained. For 5561 BC, I can show why Shamogra is how described as near Nakshatra Jeshta and also settled there for a long time. I can also show for 5561 BC why Saturn was near Chitra and also settled there for a long time. Okay, all right. So this is done. This is done. Let's come to this one first, and then I'll come to this at the end. So Karna Parva, the last second line, let's read on the second line. Brahaspati Rohini Samprapidya Bhaguva Chandrarka Samana Varna. Something very interesting that this is from Karna Parva, 17th day of the war after sunset. That's when the description is coming. That Brahaspati, which is again Jupiter, see Brahaspati, 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 3 times, okay? That Jupiter is giving a pida, is afflicting Nakshatra Rohini. Remember, we saw it with Saturn, it was also afflicting Nakshatra Rohini. Something more here, and because we are not discussing moon and sun evidence, I'll not go into the detail, but it says Brahaspati on the 17th day of the war after sunset was giving pida to Rohini, exactly the same way sun and moon were giving pida. Babhuva Chandrarka Samana Virna, or you'll see some part away the variations that gives you more richer meaning in combination. All right. So here we looked at the 2, then Shamograha as a third. I am asserting is Jupiter, but if somebody doesn't agree, not a big issue. They have to say what is that Shamograha and then show that it was near Jeshta for the year they are claiming. Okay, and why also it was considered Tishtati, the same way Shvetograha was near Chitra, and why it is described exactly the same way, Akramya Tishtati. Okay, now come to the last one. Again, here I am showing this from Bhishma Parva 313. I'm going to count this once here for Jupiter. We are going to count this again for Mars. Why is that? Look at the second line. Maghas Angarako Vakra Shravane Brahaspati. It's saying Angarak went Vakra near Magha and Brahaspati, Jupiter, went Vakra near Shravana. So because we are looking at the Jupiter evidence, we are counting this verse for Jupiter near Shravana, going Vakra near Shravana, and we will count again Angarak, that is Mars, going Vakra near Magha. This also provides us something very interesting, is also a demand on any researcher that whatever Jupiter is doing near Shravana is what Angarak ought to do near Nakshatra Magha. Let me tell you again, very interesting. I did that for Saturn. Very interesting. This one we already discussed. Not even a single other Mahabharata researchers can show Brahaspati and Shanashchara in the vicinity of a Vishakha, settled there for a long time, meaning up to a year, and shining brightly. No one else other than 5561 BCE. Guess what? No other Mahabharata researcher, exceptions none, can show Brahaspati giving a pida to Rohini, similar to the way sun and moon were giving pida to Rohini together. And that's a different issue we're not going to discuss because I don't want to discuss sun and moon here. I have discussed it elsewhere multiple times, so follow those videos. But something else. Remember the word pidya. So the Brahaspati is giving pida to Rohini. Chandra and Surya were giving pida to Rohini, and we saw in Saturn evidence that the Saturn was giving pida to Rohini. Okay, so there has to be some consistency. the way Brihaspati is giving Pida to Rohini, Sun and Moon giving Pida to Rohini, and Saturn giving Pida to Rohini. Again, there is an indirect reference to Chandrarka Samana Varna, but there is a separate reference that Sun and Moon were giving Pida to Rohini will not go there. Something else. I already said that the way Jupiter, Brihaspati is going Vakra near Shravana has to have a consistency with Angara going Vakra near Maga. There is an expectation for consistency, scientific acumen, logical reasoning. All right. So we have 4 references here, 6 from Saturn. So that's like 10. Let's go to Mars. Now, let's see where is the repetition. Okay, we'll come to that repetition. It's number 3 here. The words that we saw, Magaswangara Kovakra, Shravanicha, Brihaspati. We are double counting here. Why? Because again, 2 planets are mentioned doing the same thing, similar thing, Vakra. Okay, and so it brings additional constraints. Well, additional constraints in what way? That Angaraka has to be near Maga. I don't want to say near. Angaraka has to go Vakra near Maga, and Jupiter has to go Vakra near Shravana. Okay, so there is a constraints on Mars. It brings additional constraints on Mars. Mars has to do something with Maga, and Jupiter has to do something with Shravana. But don't forget that Jupiter has also to do something with Vishaka, and Jupiter has also something to do with the Rohini. And if one accepts my assertion that Shamagra is a Jupiter, then Jupiter has to do something with the Jeshta. See, this is how the constraints are placed, and this is how we solve a jigsaw puzzle or a crossword puzzle. Okay, so total of 10 here. Let's go to the Mars. Now, there are a total of 8 instances. So 10 plus 8 is 18 instances. 18 instances of planetary evidence. Now, notice something that this number 1 and 2, they are next to each other, 141.8, 141.9. Similarly, number 4 and 5, that's Bhishma Parva 3.16 and 3.17. So why I have separated them? I have separated them for 2 reasons. First thing, they give different descriptions. So that's like different instances about the same planet. I am saying, I'm asserting that the description in number 1 and number 2, 141.8, 141.9 next to each other, is about the exactly same planet, namely Angarak. The descriptions given in number 4 and number 5 next to each other, 3.16, 3.17, are exactly about the same planet, namely Loitanga. What is Angarak? Mars. What is Loitanga? Mars. But I have split them in 2 ways because they are different descriptions, but also one more reason. Many Mahabharata researchers have treated 141.8 as if referring to one planet, 141.9 as if referring to another planet. They have done the same thing many times, 3.16 as if referring to one planet and 3.17 as if referring to another planet. Now, this is what people who are getting deep into this must understand. So which one is correct? Well, why not try both options? So let me give you an example here. So as far as the number we have done, 10 plus 8, that's 18. But suppose somebody treats this as number 141.8 as one planet, 141.9 as another planet. What is the requirement? The requirement is this. The first planet, the first reference is very clear. Krutva Changarako Vakra Jeshtaya Madhusudana Anuradha Prarthayate Maitram Samshama Yanniva. Krutva Changarako Vakra. Angarak went Vakra, okay, near Jeshtha Anuradha. That's what that verse is saying. Okay, don't forget Angarak going Vakra near Maga. So Mars has to do whatever it did near Maga, it has to do the same thing near Jeshta Anuradha, and Jupiter has to do the same thing near Nakshatra Shravana. What a beautiful opportunity. And that's why I said, deliberately, you must pick another second best claim you can think of besides 5561 BC. And when you test each of these observations using a software, do the comparison. Okay. And now you'll understand why no other Mahabharata researcher dares discuss more than 5 instances of planetary evidence. They were not able to show this. So back to this. So yes, so they have to show how Mars went Vakri near Jeshta Anuradha. In the same fashion, in a consistent fashion, it goes Vakri near Maga. And in the same consistent fashion, it goes sorry, Jupiter goes Vakri near Shravana, but something else. If they treat number 2 reference 141.9 as a separate planet, for example, somebody may just read Nunam Madhvayam Krishna Kurunam Samupastitam Visheshanai Varshnaya Chitram Pidiyate Graha. And actually, lo and behold, many Mahabharata researchers, do you know what they do? They Graha, they say some planet is giving Pida to Chitra. Okay, be my guest. I am saying this is actually nothing but reference to Mars giving a Pida, okay, Visheshana, in a very peculiar fashion. Visheshana Varshnaya Chitra Pidete, in a peculiar fashion to Chitra. So then if I say these are same, then my responsibility is to show Mars going Vakra near Jeshta Anuradha in the same fashion. That same Mars has to go Vakra near Nakshatra Maga. In the same fashion, the Jupiter has to go Vakra near Shravana in the context of my calendar year of Mahabharata War 5561 BCE. If somebody else claims this is Angarak, I mean Mars, and this is of course Mars, I mean you have no choice but to see. That's what I mean. People can do some playing with interpretation, and sometimes that's required. Okay, it's maybe considered reasonable, but there are limits. For example, Angarak, you will not able to play with it. Angarak here, you will not able to play with it. Same thing with the Brahaspati. Okay, now if somebody treats this as a separate planet, I consider this as Angarak only, and therefore my responsibility is to show how this Angarak is giving a afflicting Chitra, giving a Pida in a very peculiar fashion. But somebody who thinks this is some other planet, they have to say now which planet it is. Now, there is no sufficient description, so they can take any guess, and I'm good with it. But once they decide what planet they guess, now it's okay to demand, like, why did you think that particular planet is that? Now, but even if we skip this aside, because we won't reach that far, then that person has to show why that particular planet is giving Pida to Chitra in a peculiar fashion. Okay, let's move on. We already discussed this, so I'll skip this. Now let's come to number 4. I am asserting that number 4 and number 5 are basically descriptions for the same planet Lohitanga, which means Mars. Dhruvam prajulitam ghoram apasavya pravartate chitra swatintare cheva dishtita parushagraha, and then it goes vakran vakram krutvam cha shravane pavaka prabha brahmarashi samavritya lohitango vyavastita. But let's do it first my way, which is to say they both are referring to Lohitango, which is Mars. In that case, what does those first two lines suggest? They say dhruvam prajulitam ghoram, by becoming fixed and becoming very bright. Okay, ghoram, by scary bright. Apasavya pravardate, and by starting going in a very non-normal, abnormal direction. Apasavya, going forward in a apasavya direction. Okay, what this planet did, I'm saying it's a Mars, right? That Parusha, that this is evil planet. What did it do? It became dishtita, okay, steady between Chitra and Swati. So essentially, that's a wonderful description of a planet going retrograde between Chitra and Swati. Now, that planet, I am asserting it's a Lohitango, which is Mars. And so my responsibility is to show Mars going retrograde near Chitra Swati for the year 5561 BC. Now, since that description continues, let's go there. Vakranu Vakram Krutvam. This Vakranu Vakram Krutvam is very easy to understand if you look at the entire Mars evidence. What do you see? There is Mars Angarak here. It's called Loitanga here. It's called Angarak. Okay. Now somebody says, "Oh, I don't know that." Well, you have to stop this. You are not ready for Mahabharata astronomy if you don't know that Angarak is equal to Lohitango is equal to Mars. Okay. So Mars is going Vakra near Jeshta. Mars is going Vakra near Magha. So that's what it is referring to. So Vakranu Vakram Krutvam cha, after that. Okay. After doing all through that, then what did it do? It came near Prutvacha, Shravane Pavaka Prabha, it came near bright Shravana Nakshatra. So that's a constraint. It has to come near Shravana Nakshatra. And then what? Brahma Rashi Samavritya, Brahma Rashi, Abhijit, Vega. It came Samavritta, okay, almost same longitude, let's say, or some Vritta. I mean, in this case, the motion of the planet is along the equator or ecliptic, and therefore we are going to look at longitudes. Okay, so therefore I've said Samavritya referring to longitudes, more or less in the along the line of Brahmarashi or Abhijit, and it settled there, Vyavasthita. Okay, it came there nicely. So my description, I'm saying number 4 and number 5 refers to Mars. That's why they are here. And so my responsibility is to show Mars going retrograde near Chitra and Swati, and then Mars coming near Shravana and aligning itself along Brahma Rashi, which is Abhijit, which is Vega. Okay, that's what I have to show. Now, someone would accept this as referring to Mars. In that case, they have to show that the Mars was near Brahmarashi and Shravan. Now, Shravan and Brahmarashi are next to each other. Shravan and Abhijit are next to each other. So that's not an issue. But they have to show why Vasudev is describing Mars near Shravan and Brahmarashi, which day and why. Okay. On the other hand, suppose these other Mahabharata researchers, by the way, these guys don't talk about this, but that's a different story. That's why I said, do take another claim and understand why only they barely discuss 5, and even there it's a disaster. But I want you to experience that disasters for any other year of Mahabharata war firsthand, and not just believe what I'm saying here. So Bhishma Parva here, sorry, yeah, so number 4. If they think that this particular reference line does not refer to Mars, I would say be my guest. But whatever planet now they want to claim here for their claimed year of Mahabharata war, they have to show how that particular planet was going retrograde retrograde between Chitra and Swati. Easy? Be my guest. Okay, now what we have, number 6 and 7, let's look at them. These are descriptions for the first day of the war, and essentially there is a conjunction-like situation where Angarak is seen near Buddha, or Buddha and Angaraka were either very close to each other or they were seen together, something like this. Okay, that's why I said conjunction-like situation. Okay, number 7, again, conjunction-like situation. The Shukra and Angara, that is Venus and Mars. Number 6, Mercury and Mars. They were close, they were seen together, same part of the sky, the way you want to do it, for the first day of the war. Now, something very interesting. Okay, so that's first day of the war. Now, fast forward to the 18th day of the war, and now we have a reference, Bhrugu Suno Dhara Putro Shashi Jena Samanvito. They were seen together, they were in a conjunction-like scenario. Who are those? These 3 planets, guys: Angarak, Buddha, and Shukra. Mars, Mercury, and Venus. On the 18th day, they were together. So first day, Angarak and Buddha is described together in some fashion. Shukra and Angarak are described together in some fashion. And on the 18th day, those 3 are described in some fashion, which is to say they were in conjunctions, they were nearby, they could be seen together, and so on and so forth. So these are the 8 different references that one ought to test for Mars. So we have about 18. Let's go to Venus and Mercury. Before that, there is one additional aspect to this. I have asserted what it meant, but somebody wants to give some other explanation. Fine, just bring the evidence, which is this. The first 2 lines related to this Brahaspati Shanishcharo again are referring to Graho, Tamra, Arunashikho. Okay, that these planets, this is plural, by the way, plural because there are 2. That's why you see Ubho, Sthito, and so on. Okay, so Graho, the Tamra, Arunashikho with a bright coppery extensions. And I thought I have explained that in a separate video, but it's just a beautiful one to see here. Okay, so Jupiter with its moons here, and Saturn, of course, with its disk, but also the moons. Now, keep in mind that Jupiter also has a disk like Saturn, but it's not that easy to see. Okay, so anyways, then I have asserted that this Tamra Arunashikha, coppery bright extensions, is basically referring to these moons of Jupiter and moons of Saturn, and which also means Vasudev, Mahabharata times, 7,500 years ago, 5516 BC, had telescopic abilities. So this is just a quick explanation, but look for the explanations of other Mahabharata researchers. Many will simply not bother to do it, and those who make an attempt to give the explanation, they make a as of themselves. Okay, definitely look for those explanations. Okay, and their validation. Very interesting. Okay, let's quickly go to the Venus. Okay, now how many references we have for Venus? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So 18 plus 6, that's 24. Okay, so we have 24 references. Now, let's see if there is a duplication. Well, there is. Let's go to this number 2. I didn't number this here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So this one here is essentially the verse that got repeated. Okay, this was there in the Mars evidence because of the Shukra Angaraka Yori. Okay, so again, as I explained, I won't have to explain this in elaboration, that the fact that there are two planets mentioned, they bring certain restrictions on both of them because they have to be in that position and still satisfy all the additional descriptions of that individual planet. Okay, so this one is a repetition. All right. Yeah, do pay attention. Now, the next one, number 3, we see here Budhasya Shukrasya. So now Mercury and Venus together. Budhasya Shukrabhya, Mercury and Venus. Okay. Buddha Bhargava, that Bhargava again referring to the Venus. Okay. So what do we have? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Okay. 9th day of the war and 2 on the 14th day of the war, referring to Mercury and Venus in conjunction like situation, close to each other in the same part of the sky, something like this. So there are 3 references essentially saying the same thing, one on the 9th day, other on the 14th day. So that's something needs to be checked. Then this one is a duplication. That's the 4th one. Shukra and Angaraka on the first day of the war. And this one also is a duplication, if you remember, that Mars, Venus, and Mercury, all 3 together in conjunction-like situation, seen together, close by, but in conjunction, seen together on the 18th day of the war. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we explained. And this one, beautiful. Okay, what do we have here? Shukra Proshtapade Purve Samaruya Vishampate Uttaretu Parikramya Sahita Pratyudikshite. This is a classic, wonderful, very precise description of Shukra, Venus going retrograde. How do I know that? Well, you need to know astronomy. Okay, basics of astronomy. When Venus goes retrograde, it will go in a 2 fashion. There are a couple other variations, but either it will go and then turn back and make a circle. Now, it may make a circle by turning northward. It may make a circle by turning southward. That's the variations are. But essentially, it will make a circle. So if you have to simplify, when Shukra, Venus goes retrograde, it will make a circle in the sky. Okay. Or it will make like a Z, like English letter Z or Z, in the sky. It appears that at the time of Mahabharata war, it made a circle in the sky. That's why that parikrama word comes. Uttaretu parikramya sahita pratyudikshite. So that's what Shukra did. Again, 5561 BCE. Go and check it. Shukra beautifully goes retrograde near Nakshatra Purva, Proshtapada, Purva Bhadrapada, makes a circle and goes further. No other Mahabharata researcher for their year can show this. No other Mahabharata researcher. This is true for everything else too. No other Mahabharata researcher will able to show Venus and Mars together on the first day of the war, or Venus, Mars, and Mercury together on the 18th day of the war, last day of the war, whatever they claim as the last day of the war. And of course, like showing these conjunction-like scenarios for the 9th or the 14th day of the war. So 18 plus 6, 24. Let's look at the last one, which is Mercury. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So how many we had there? I'm forgetting now. I think we had 24 plus 8. So that's 32. That's what I counted to 32. Now let's look at the duplicates first. Okay, so this one is a duplicate. Angaraka Buddha Viva that occurred before into the Mars evidence. So we have to look at conjunction-like scenario. Here we have a Buddhasya Shukrasya. We just saw into the Venus evidence. Okay, so that's there. So that's another duplication. Here Buddha Shukra, here Buddha Bhargava. We looked at that duplication. But understand why we are counting again. because it puts additional constraints on a specific planets or a combination of planets, and they also have to satisfy other descriptions. So it's a beautiful evidence, very powerful evidence. And again, we also looked at this one, Bhrugu Suno Dhara Putro Shashi Jena Samandito. Okay, Mars, Mercury, and Venus together in a conjunction-like scenario, seen in the same part of the sky, seen together on the last day of the war. Okay, so if you remove those, then we are left with three. Here, Trishu Purveshu Sarveshu Nakshatreshu Vishapate. This has been interpreted by few in many different ways. Again, I have done a full episode on this. But whichever way it is, whichever the interpretation you do, meaningful interpretation, that you have to show that my translation I'll give you quickly, that Buddha, Mercury, was traveling through the three Sampatate Bhikshnam or Sampatate Shirsham into the three Yogatara areas of the three nakshatras eastward, east of the sun. And for 5561, that comes to Mula, Purvashada, Uttarashada. Okay, so that's that. My explanation. Somebody may have a different interpretation, but then they have to show how that is true for their year and why that is significant. Along with, they have to explain how that Mercury also explains these rest of the rest of the 7 descriptions. Okay, then we have already discussed this, so I'll not go through that. I'll come down to this. On the 9th day of the war, there is a description of as if Mercury and Saturn together. Okay, so somebody has to explain that, how Mercury and Saturn were together, seen together, etc., or in some context seen together on the 9th day of the war. Here I will explain, I will mention that I could not show Mercury and Saturn together on the 9th day of the war. In fact, I will say that no other Mahabharata researcher will also able to show this. Do you know why? How can I say that? Well, that depends on where you imagine Saturn. Okay, but suppose we definitely know the position of a Mercury. Where is it? It's near Sun. Where is the position of a Sun? It's at Nakshatra Jyeshta, based on additional Mahabharata evidence that we have not discussed here. Nakshatra Jyeshta plus minus say 2 nakshatra. So Buddha is not going to be that far from Jyeshta. And where can be the desired position of Saturn? That's very interesting. I don't want to make this complicated. But remember, it was near Nakshatra Bhaga. It was in the vicinity of Vishaka along with Jupiter. And it was afflicting Rohini. So even whether you put it at Rohini, whether you put it at Vishaka, you might able to justify that. But Bhaga or Rohini, you will not able to explain this particular reference. Based on that, I said I cannot explain that for 5561 BC. That is when I started looking for the part of it. And actually, I have explained it, showing that it is actually referring to Buddha and Nishakara and not Shanishchara. But you can watch that separate episode. Now, if somebody else says, oh, okay, well, I don't want to take Nishakara, I want to actually take Shanishchara, I would say, be my guest. Now, show me that 9th day of the war, Mercury and Saturn were together in some fashion, in exactly same fashion that would be acceptable for this reference or this reference or for this reference or for this reference or for this reference. That is what we talk by scientific consistency. Okay, so quickly the last one. This one is additional reference to Somasya Putro, which is Mercury again, just like here it's called Shashi Jaina, son of moon. Here Somasya Putro, son of moon. Okay, that same planet, Mercury. And again, very specific description on the 17th day of the war. After sunset, Jagam Chastam Cha Astam Savita Divakar. Somasya Putro Vidayatiya. And after sunset on the 17th day of the war, Somaputra, that is Mercury, was rising up. Very fascinating. I can show that. I have shown it, a separate episode, why that description matches for the 17th day of the war. That's like 1st of November, 5561 BC. No other Mahabharata researcher dare discuss that. No other Mahabharata researcher dare discuss this. No other Mahabharata researcher dare discuss this. No other Mahabharata researcher dare discuss any of these. People, the other Mahabharata researchers, not all of them, very few of them, very few, and I can't even uh, think of a name, who have attempted to discuss this. I mean, there are disasters everywhere else. They tried to do this, and guess what? They discuss in such a way that it is trivial and meaningless. The explanation is trivial and meaningless. It doesn't help in any way. It doesn't put any constraints. Like anybody with their interpretation, anybody, including myself, will able to explain that observation. But that will make it too complicated. So I'll stop here. That's it. So that's it. We'll stop here. So quickly, these are the 32 descriptions for the visible planets. The person who wants to do it definitely must learn the astronomy software first, then at a minimum, select one other claim other than 5561 BCE that he or she thinks is a at least a decent challenger for the claim of 5561 BCE, and then look at these 32 descriptions, take that software, go after a day if there is a specific day. If not, that particular year of the claimed year of the Mahabharata war, 5561 BC, or that any other that he or she would like to compare. And look, start with the Saturn, start with Jupiter, then Mars, then Mercury and Venus. Now, we talked about different ways to skin a cat. First thing is you will look at each of the reference, but then remember some of the references are together, like Vakri motion, Jupiter doing near Shravana, Mars doing near Magha, and Mars also doing near Jyeshtanuvada. So you have to say, is that consistent? Then when we look at these conjunction-like scenarios, what is the kind of latitude? Latitude in the sense, the flexibility, that is not the latitude in the astronomy sense. That can be considered acceptable. Okay. And is this directionally consistent? And then, of course, some, again, very specific conjunction-like scenarios, all three planets together, seen together, etc., same part of the sky, etc., on the 18th day of the war. What is that? Mercury showing up after sunset, coming up on the 17th day of the war, and so on and so forth. All right, I'm going to stop at this to this individual, and I'll find his initials after this. If you can respond to me in the email or in public, whichever way you want to do it, just let me know what you think of this, and hope this helps. And if you go ahead and do this with the software, I hope in the interest of Indic Renaissance, you present your findings in some fashion, either in a book or a blog or a YouTube video like this. All right. Namaskar.